Good morning. I'd like to welcome all of you to Congressman Hagedorn's 11th in-person town hall. And we're very happy that all of you could join us today. My name is I serve as the district director for Congressman Hagedorn. We're going to begin this morning with a moment of prayer led by Pastor Hines. Pastor Hines, please rise.
Let us bow our heads in prayer. O Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, we are gathered here that there may be good things done for those whom we serve. Lord God, cause our hearts, hands, and feet to never grow weary while engaged in the opportunities of selfless service, in performing the loving challenges you present to each of us in both small and large ways. You remind us that in due season we shall indeed reap if we do not lose heart. Continually guide us in this gathering so that fruitful results may be seen days, months, and even years to come. With your heavenly guidance, may all representations and deliberations be blessed in your presence. And grant us your wisdom in all we think, do, and say. And may this acronym be a guide to each of our communications before we speak. THINK. Think. Is it true? Is it helpful? Is it inspired or inspiring? Is it necessary? And is it kind? Graciously grant us these things, O God. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Hines. If you'd remain standing, please, we will be saying the Pledge of Allegiance. And this morning, we will be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by Chris Hinton, Veteran Service Officer.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. I know that you're all eager to hear from Congressman Hagedorn. We'll start in just a couple minutes. I'm just going to lay out a few things to keep this running smoothly. This is a family-friendly event. It's an official event, which means it's not political. So no signs are permitted. If you are waving a sign, you will be asked to lay it on the floor. Congressman Hagedorn will begin with an update on what's happening in D.C., and then we will get to your questions. The questions, which are being brought here, we have two fish bowls, and as you came in, if you chose to ask a question, we did ask to CID to make sure that Blue Earth County residents were given priority for today. So you can see I have two fish bowls, one for those that live outside of Blue Earth County and those that do live here in Blue Earth County. And we will select from Blue Earth County residents' questions first, and if we have any time remaining, we will move on to the rest. These questions are drawn randomly by me, and then the congressman will answer the questions. So, without any further talking from me, please welcome Congressman Hagedorn.
Thank you. I appreciate being here and taking the time on this Saturday. It's a cold Saturday morning to talk a little bit about the issues and go back and forth. I want to thank Ms. McLaughlin and the fine veteran service officer from Waseca, here at Blue Earth and Waseca counties, and all you do for veterans and helping people out. I know your father's been involved for many, many years and others. Our friend Joe Stack, of course, Joe, is he here? He's in the back. He's our Veterans Outreach Coordinator. And so if anybody ever has any issues dealing with veterans, and you talk with your fine veteran service officers in your counties or in our office, we're happy to have Joe and myself, Carol, any of us, help you out. So I'll just give you a real quick update on what's going on in Washington. But before that, just to address kind of the job in general, I am very much honored to be a representative in Congress, the U.S. House from Minnesota's 1st District. Our district goes all the way from South Dakota to Wisconsin and Iowa up about 80 miles. So New Prague would be basically the top of the district if you're looking at it from this point. And 21 counties, so pretty good territory to get across and to work through. We have quite a few people in the district that do outreach, including two right up here, Carol and Brian, who help us out. Carol's the district director. Neil Breitbart is here, he's our deputy, and I think Karen Eberhardt, that might be the group in addition to Joe. And so we do our best to help you out. There's several basic duties or responsibilities to the job, and the first is to vote. You have to go out to Washington, D.C. and cast votes on the House floor. And I've done that 600 and let's see now, 67 times out of 671. So 99.5% voting record, pretty good. And we do that, and I kind of try to reflect your views and values in that. We'll discuss how that works. The second, I serve on committees. So I work real hard with our leaders in the Republican Party, because that's how it's done. The leaders of your own party are the ones that put you on your committees. And I told them, I said, yeah, I made promises to people that if elected, I wanted to serve on the Ag Committee. And so we were able to secure that assignment. So I'm on Ag and also Small Business Committees, which pretty much fit this district. Our district has 3 sectors, main sectors: agriculture, small business and manufacturing, and medical. And then the next responsibility we have is to author legislation, like our bill that we have with Congressman Van Drew, a very bipartisan legislation to expand our workforce opportunities. We'll talk a little bit about that, and many other bills that we've co-sponsored. And from there, they have responsibility to make sure that, and this is one of the best ones, to nominate people to serve in our service academies. Whether go out to Colorado Springs and be there with the Air Force, or go to Annapolis with the Navy, or West Point. It's really quite an honor to be able to interact with so many young people who want to serve our country. And the way that works is when they're a junior, about 16 years old, in the spring, they apply. And then about right now, we get to the point where we start making some determinations, and then we send those nominations along. And many of them will be selected to serve our country and get a great education. So that's just a terrific opportunity. Sometimes people don't quite understand how this job works. They think you go to Washington, you stay out in Washington. That's not true. When we go out, usually we spend about 3 nights when we're in session each week. And I've made 32 round trips now so far this year alone to go back and forth. So we're back in the district every week, basically. And I think only 2 times I stayed out there. One was for a Republican retreat, and the other was the first weekend when we were getting our office together. So we come back every weekend, we work the district, and we try to stay connected as best as possible. And one of the best ways that we have to do that is these town halls all across the district. We're doing 21, one in each of the counties, and we'll do even more than that. We'll do many by telephone later. As we do it, we'll come back and do some counties a second time. So in Washington, I guess you can tell there's kind of a lot going on and not a lot going on from your perspective. But the stuff that is going on, I guess I'll just put it this way. I guess with what's going to happen this next week, the very consequential votes, historic votes that will be taken, I just want to be flat out honest with you, as I have been with folks in the district and through the media all along. I think that the impeachment process that the Democrats have undertaken is overtly political. I believe that it's divisive. I believe that it's unwarranted. It's an unwarranted attempt to remove our duly elected president. And when the articles of impeachment are submitted for a vote, I'm going to vote no. So other than impeachment, we should be doing a lot of other things. We're finally getting this trade bill done with Mexico and Canada. We'll talk a lot about trade. But I was the first elected official in the state of Minnesota to come out for that. Support it real hard. It's good for our farmers and others. But that is one thing that we're getting done because of impeachment, because I think the other side, Speaker Pelosi and her team, have decided that they have to show some progress on something. And it can't just be about impeachment. So we got that out of the deal so far. That's good. We need a lot more. like infrastructure, transportation infrastructure bill. We need compromise and bipartisanship on prescription drugs to lower the cost there, healthcare issues, border security, and on it goes. So there's lots of things that need to be done with bipartisanship on both sides. Hopefully we can move forward in the future on that. The state of the economy, as I see it, is very strong. You go anywhere across this district and you ask business owners and others, what's your biggest impediment? And they're not going to tell you they don't have demand, that there aren't the consumers out there, that they can't get work. Their biggest impediment is workforce. They can't find skilled workers to fill the needed jobs. We did a hearing in small business about 2 weeks ago, and an owner of a construction company from Pennsylvania was there, and he testified that there are 300,000 open jobs in the construction industry alone in this country. There's demand in the economy for the work that people are doing. And you see a lot of the buildings going up here and around Mankato, a lot of new banks, a lot of new business buildings, hotel, I think, coming in with Marriott, others. You talk to the manufacturers, there's one right here from Blue Earth County in the front row, and they'll tell you, demand is there, they just can't find the workers. And so one of the things that we wanted to do, because we're crossing the district and saying, what can we do to be helpful in Washington? I said, well, we need to figure out a way to keep encouraging people to get into the skilled workforce, the vocational trades, things like that. You know, for 30 years in our nation, a lot of young people have been told, if you don't go to a four-year college, you'll never amount to anything. Don't waste your time going to vocational school. That was a mistake, because we were telling people things that they should have been deciding for themselves. They should have had choice and decided it. Now we have all this massive shortage of workers. And so Congressman Van Drew, who's a Democrat from New Jersey, and I have a bill. I authored it, he co-authored it in this case. And it says that if you have one of these 529 education savings accounts, and there are quite a few in our country, there's $300 billion worth of money sitting in these accounts, that you no longer just have to use them for four-year institutions, that you can use them for certificate programs, apprenticeships, vocational training in some instances, and the purchase of tools and equipment. And that's important, because if you go down to whether it's kibble equipment with our farm products, or you go to one of the car dealerships. I was just down at Snell Motors a week or two ago talking with them about their operation. Wherever you go and you talk to people, they'll tell you that the technicians in their companies are making more than the salespeople. That the technicians are the ones that are making the money. There's a lot of great work out there for folks if we can just help them get there. And they have to make their own choice. And in this case, it's using their own money with the 529 savings accounts. But whether it's welders or machinists or truck drivers or whatever, there's truckloads of money for people to get in there and have stable, good lives and employment. And we should never, I think, talk that down again. We should tell people they should have choice. So the economy, I think, is very strong. I mean, we have a lot of job growth. We just had a jobs report last week, 300,000 new jobs, basically. We have low inflation, we have record level low unemployment, especially in many sectors, many areas where people in the past have been, in not such good shape. And that's all good stuff. The stock market is at a record high, and in many, many respects, the economy is strong. Now, for our farmers, it's been 6 years of low commodity prices, and there have been some trade negotiations back and forth with China, and the ethanol program we've been working to turn that. But I think little by little, it's turning back. My father was a farmer. I grew up on a farm here in Whatmont County nearby. And my dad always taught me, you're a farmer, you have 1 or 2 good years, and you hang on for 1 or 2 more good years. That's just the way it is in agriculture. It usually doesn't go year in and year out, ticking up. It's a lot of fluctuation in ag. But I do think we're turning the corner, especially with these trade deals, like the one with Canada and Mexico. This is long overdue. It should have been done 10 months ago. One of the reasons that we needed it is because it really does help farming and agribusiness, especially dairy farmers. There was no provision in NAFTA for dairy, and our dairy farmers faced 300% tariffs with Canada. Now we have dairy provisions. We can knock down some of those tariffs. We can expand trade. 24% of our ag trade from Minnesota goes to Canada. 24% goes to Mexico. They are our 2 biggest trading partners. Bigger than China, more important than China. So this is a good deal. It's an important deal. And I said all along, what it's going to do is help us build momentum for other deals with countries like China. And now we're seeing some momentum. First phase or phase 1, whatever you want to call it, seems to be moving forward. The Chinese seem to be in a position again to want to buy some more of our farm products, particularly poultry, because half their hogs over there are dead. They're having a tough time feeding their people. The African swine fever virus has hurt them a lot. And so now they're to a desperate point where they're actually wanting our poultry again, and that's going to help a lot of businesses. I talked to Mr. Downs, Mike Downs, just about that the other day, and they have a plant in Butterfield that's all tied to trade, mostly with China, and they've been hurting for many years because China shut them off after the flu that hit the poultry industry in the United States. Now they're opening that up, and he says, you know what, things go the right way, we might be able to double the size of our plant down in Fairmont. This is how things work with trade and opening markets, and it's all good for consumers and everybody along the lines. We have a deal with Japan coming up. That's good on beef and pork. That's really good for our livestock farmers. And then because of the Brexit vote basically yesterday where the Tories took back Great Britain with an almost unprecedented election, certainly haven't had this type of power since the 1980s with Thatcher. It's a good deal. You know what it means? Once they break loose of the European Union, they're going to cut a deal directly with the United States, and that's going to be good for them, and that's going to be good for us. Things are going the right way with the economy. The regulations have been shut down in many instances that were onerous. That helps lower cost of business. That helps you buy products at a lower cost. Taxes with tax reform have helped many small businesses and farmers and others. And you go right down the line, low energy costs, because we have energy independence, because of the policies of this administration and Republicans that wanted to open it up for oil, gas, and all of the above. These are all good things that have helped our economy, and things are in good shape, I believe, across the board. Then you get into what's going on with, I'd say that our constitutional rights. And I don't believe that we've had a president who's been stronger on the right to life and the right to keep and bear arms and the right to religious freedom in my lifetime. And I'm a Reagan guy. I love Reagan, and I thought he was the best until Trump on this. But I do believe President Trump has been strongest in these areas. And all these things that I just talked about, when I was running for office and campaigned in front of you and told you where I stood on the issues and went and dealt with reporters and all these things, I told you that I was a conservative, that if elected I would go to Washington and I would vote as a conservative, and I would be someone that would be for a strong defense, and we're doing terrific things there, someone who wanted to secure our borders and have merit-based immigration, we're moving the right direction there, who wanted to reform government, not transform America into some socialist state, but reform the federal government in the areas of regulations and taxes, energy, and welfare. I'm a work for welfare guy. And then when it came down to it, protect the basic constitutional rights, the right to life, the right to keep and bear arms, the right to religious freedom. That's what I promised on the way in. That's the way I voted in Washington. I think things are going in the right direction, but I'm happy to be with you here today and to take your questions and discuss the issues with you. Okay, Carol, let's get at it.
The first question today comes from Kevin from Eagle Lake, who asked, what are the benefits of the USMCA in comparison to NAFTA?
Yeah, well, I just said the thing in agriculture across the board. And by the way, I don't know of one ag group that wasn't for this for the last 10 minutes where we're kind of sitting around watching. But dairy is a big gain, and pork, and all the above. Because if you don't have this deal, you're back to where you were, and if we're back to where we were, it would have been worse on China. And I always told people, if we can't show that we can pass this deal with Canada and Mexico, then why would anybody expect the president to be able to work something out with China, an adversary? We're dealing with our partners here. So I don't know of any ag groups that think it was a detriment or a step back. I think it's all going to be positive, and it's going to expand trade across the board.
The next question is from Jason from Mankato. He says, hi. You always say you're clear in your positions, but you seem to be obfuscating on the Trump-Ukraine issue. Do you think it's acceptable for any elected official to withhold security assistance for political gain? Why or why not?
I think I've been very clear on the whole Ukraine deal. It's unwarranted. There's no crime there. There's no impeachable offense in my view. I always said that I think it was the New Ulm Journal, whoever it was, maybe it was one of our town halls. To me, you know there's an impeachable offense when you see it. I haven't seen it. So that's where we are. I think a lot of this has been going on for a long time. I think there's been an element of the Democratic Party that has wanted to impeach the president since before he was president. And then we went through it, and they were writing articles about it, they were making speeches about it when he was inaugurated. And then the Mueller report and the Russian thing. Oh, we've got proof of the collusion, said Schiff. Who just for that, really, should have been censured by the House. Proof of collusion, told the American people that, and they waited for a year. There was nothing. I don't hear anybody talking about the Mueller report, the Russian stuff. Some of you came to my initial town halls, told me that I should vote for impeachment over that. Even the Democrats didn't want to do that. So I think I've been very upfront with people along the way, and I believe it's unwarranted, and I'm not going to vote for impeachment.
Lee from Mankato asked, climate change will have a profound effect on southern Minnesota as well as the rest of the country. What are your views on dealing with this existential threat?
Well, you can have climate change. I said the world's been heating and cooling. Climate's been changing since God created it. We all know that. We're under an ice sheet here in London. What's that about that? What's that? The earth hasn't been heating and cooling and climate changing since God created it. We were under an ice sheet here at one point, right? Yeah.
Scientists understand climate change, and they understand the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere,
Mm-hmm.
which we're producing in unprecedented amounts,
Yeah.
is increasing the temperature. I'm sorry, but you don't have the science right.
Well, So the world hasn't been heating and cooling since God created it. Yeah? It hasn't been changing.
Cooling, but
Yeah.
it's a simple problem. There's a wall in space, it gets its energy from the sun.
Yeah.
The things that control the temperature are the energy that comes in,
Yeah.
the energy that's reflected as the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere.
Well, didn't you used to call this the greenhouse effect like 30 years ago?
I'm sorry?
Yeah, you used to call this the greenhouse effect like 30 years ago, and then it was global warming, and now it's climate change. What's it going to be next week? I'm just wondering about that. But here's the deal. Whether or not you think there's climate change, let's say we can all agree there's climate change. Then it becomes, who's responsible? Well, hang on. Well, if you're, so what, there you go. So what percent of all the carbon emissions are man-made? In the whole atmosphere, what percent?
Oh, there's enough man-made carbon.
No, can you answer my question, please? Yeah, what percent of the carbon emissions are man-made?
Why don't you tell us? Why don't you tell us?
1%.
You guys read hard out here.
It's 1%. It's 1%. It's 1%. So 99 parts natural, 1% man-made. And that's all the things going on. Well, I'm saying, my position would be this. Until we decide that we're going to turn our economy upside down, change the way we deliver oil and gas, fuel our economy, get our electricity, do all these things that you want to do with the Green New Deal, right? Which I don't support the Green New Deal. Just want to tell you flat out, I don't support it. And you Ken, that's fine. It's okay, Ken. Let's just have a little dialogue. It's okay. So you want to do all these things, and yet usually when you propose them, the people that propose them will say, if we do all those things, we still can't tell you that it's going to make a difference. But we better do all those things. And I'm on the other side. I don't believe that. I think that if there is man-made global warming, which I don't believe there is, all right? Let's tell them. I believe there's climate change. I don't believe there's man-made climate change. So if you believe that, there are ways to mitigate that other than transforming economies and changing the way we deliver fuel and electricity and driving up the cost of every product and service in our economy, making us less competitive around the world and degrading our standard of living. Here's why I support the area of energy, and I'm very, very honest about it. And if you have people on the other side that are for the Green New Deal, I'll be interested in campaigning with those people and debating that down the road. So far, nobody's come forward and said they're for that. You know, all these people that say they're for it, you might want to find a candidate that's for that, because so far I haven't heard that. I'm for an all the above strategy on energy. We should use all the above, all the resources that are at our disposal in order to have the lowest cost energy and the most efficient economy and the fastest growing, the best growing economy in the world with the highest standard of living that we have today. If we can move to cleaner energy, and there is no such thing as clean energy, they all have their problems. Every form of energy has its problems. None of them are clean, all right? When we can move towards that, that's great. If we can do it in an efficient and effective way. But well, what would you suggest that we do to deliver electricity right now to our grid?
Solar and wind and battery power.
Hang on. So, why aren't they doing that then in New York? Why aren't they doing that?
Excel Energy has a plan.
Yeah, I know.
To go carbon neutral.
By 2050, right? Okay, well, what are we going to do tomorrow? What are we going to do next week? What are we going to do the year? So it's irresponsible to project and to say that we should change the way we deliver electricity in our country, where nobody has to worry about the lights going on and everything's wonderful, right? And they're fairly low cost, except where it's being driven up by mandates. But you would like us to say, no more fossil fuels, let's use the wind, let's use the solar, let's use these batteries that don't exist in an efficient way. They don't. And it's irresponsible to do that. It's not technologically feasible to deliver the power to our grid that way.
But the technology of batteries will make it possible.
Sir, it will make it possible. When it's possible, when it can happen, when it's efficient, I'll be the first one to join you. But it's not technologically feasible today to do it and to deliver base load power to the grid. You need coal, you need nuclear, you need natural gas, you need hydro, you need all these other, yes, you need, sir. Hang on. Hang on. Look, ma'am, can wind and solar deliver base load power today to power the grid? Hang on. Will be able to. Can they do it today? Not today. Okay. And I've said when you have hey Kim, come on, please. So when you have technology available that can deliver base load power with wind and solar and other alternatives like that, and you can do it in an efficient way, and you can do it effectively, I will be the first one to support that. But until then, it would be irresponsible of us to say and give everyone the impression that we can do it, because we can't do it today.
We've spent a lot of time on this question.
So in addition, thank you for your question. So in addition, what I support are the pipelines, the distribution points, and the refineries, and to do everything that we have to in order to keep the price of electricity and fuel low. Because when the price of electricity and fuel go higher, the price of every product and service in our economy goes higher, we become less affluent, we have less disposable income, we become less competitive. That's my position. When it's technologically feasible, when it makes sense, absolutely. But we're not there yet, and to say otherwise is not realistic and it's not responsible.
Okay, we're going to move on. We're moving on to the next question. We have an entire bowl full here of questions from residents of Blue Earth County. Ma'am, we're going to move on to the next question. John Paul from Mankato asks, do you plan to support the impeachment of the president as your constituents want?
Overwhelmingly. Judge Paul, and I would like to see your polling data, because
I don't need polling data. I don't need polling data. I told you what my position was.
I understand.
I'm not polling the
Your
district.
constituents, and you only barely won the election.
So,
And a lot of people have changed their mind about Donald Trump.
okay.
So have you polled?
Well, sir, if that's the case,
Because you represent
if
us.
that's the case, sir, if
If
that's the case, sir,
then you are not our
I
representative.
don't know why you're so angry, okay? there's no reason to be angry. We can have a discussion, you don't need to be angry about it, I don't get that. But, hey, sir, I've been as honest with you as anybody who's ever served in this seat has been about where I stood on this issue. You know where I stand. I have 4 opponents that have never discussed this in public. Can't come out and tell anybody where they stand. I would find it interesting. So maybe you should take whatever anger you brought to this and divert it to them and say, how come they're not standing up? Because I've been...
attacking an honored veteran.
Okay, let's,
So you're gonna turn this into a
You
political
are
thing.
not a veteran. Sit down and shut up.
let's be respectful of the congressman. Let's be respectful of the congressman and of one another. If as I said at the beginning, this is not a political event, it's
No,
an official.
sir,
Sir, sir,
you
please.
have been talking about technology and so on, are the very things that are man-made.
Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave if you cannot be respectful. Please, please. Let's be respectful of one another.
Because you do not deserve your seat. Wrong.
The congressman has many questions to answer from Blue Earth County residents, and we're going to move on. Paul Lang of Mankato asks, I'm of the understanding that there are a lot of bills passed by the House that haven't been brought to a vote in the Senate. Do you think that this is the way our government should function?
So I agree with that. There are a lot of bills that passed the House and haven't gone through the Senate. And that was the case in the last Congress where the Republicans actually were in control of the House and sent a bunch of bills to the Senate and they didn't get through. And the Republicans controlled the Senate in both instances. Why is that? Because the rules of the Senate are this: you need 60 votes to pass any bill. It's hard to get people to agree on what day it is over there and get 60 votes to do that. So the rules of the Senate are such that you know it's tough to get 60 votes. If you have a Republican bill in the Senate, you got to get eight Democrats to go along. If you find a bill that they bring along from the House that's a Democrat bill or liberal, now you got to find a bunch of Republicans to join the Democrats. So until they change their rules over there and go to a 50 plus 1 vote, which is the way I think they should go. There's nothing in the Constitution. It's just a rule they made up over there in the Senate to do 60 votes for cloture and 60 votes to pass. I think until they do that, we're going to have a tough time getting things through the Senate. So what they've been spending their time on in the Senate is getting judges through. 170 new judges that the president has nominated. They've done a terrific job on that. I'm excited about the way that's worked out. One of them is Justice Kavanaugh, terrific guy, doing a great job. What they did to Justice Kavanaugh was absolutely despicable. We should never do things like that to somebody trying to get in office like that. But as far as the Senate's concerned, if you want to get bills through the Senate, if Speaker Pelosi wants to get bills through the Senate, there's a pretty simple way to do it. She just needs to go over and work with Mitch McConnell before she pushes her bills through the House. And they need to negotiate, they need to compromise. Because in the end, if they won't pass it in the Senate and the president won't sign it, it's not going to become law. I'll give you one example of a bill where Nancy Pelosi turned it completely political and it would already have been law for 10 months if she went and worked with the other side. The Violence Against Women Act. Something that's been on the books for 20 plus years. Nonpartisan issue. Almost virtually 100% support in the House and 100% support in the Senate. And you know why? It came up this year and it was a partisan vote. Because instead of just taking the old law and reauthorizing it for the future, she put gun control in it.
Yes.
And you know what happened? And you know what happened when she put gun control in it? Well, you can be for gun control. I'm not for gun control. I'm for the Second Amendment and the legal and law-abiding right of people to keep and bear arms. But you can be for gun control all day long, and so can Speaker Pelosi. But if you want the Violence Against Women Act to be enacted into law and be reauthorized, then you have to realize when you put gun control in there, it isn't going to pass the Senate, and the president isn't going to sign it until law. So if she takes, what's that, ma'am?
Background checks are constitutional and guns are central to violence
Yeah,
against women.
but I'm telling you. So you can be for gun control. You can be for gun confiscation, which is half the Democrat. You can be for all that stuff. But if you don't want to compromise and work a bill that's going to pass the Senate, don't complain when it doesn't pass the Senate. And don't complain when it doesn't get enacted into law. You need to work with the other side. The Democrats have 1 out of the 3 groups here. They have the House, we have the Senate, and the President's a Republican. If you don't want to compromise, you're not going to get your bills through. It's pretty simple.
Need to be brought to the floor of the Senate before they can go.
Do you know how the Senate works, man? Do you know? Okay, one at a time. So, hang on.
Let's have
one at a
order.
time.
Let's have order. The congressman cannot answer your questions if you're shouting, and please be seated. You are not from this county. This is not your question, and we're going to, we'll move on to the next question. We have a lot of questions to get to.
Ma'am, look, while you're on your phone, look up the word cloture and then Senate and see what comes up. And it's going to tell you 60 votes. That's what it takes to bring a bill up in the Senate. 60 votes. Hang on. So, of course, but you can't. Oh, I'm sorry, I misspoke. It takes, really. Here's what I didn't speak on. It takes 60 votes to bring the bill up in the Senate. If you don't get 60 votes to bring the bill up, you're not going to get to vote on it in final passage. You're correct on final passage. It takes 1 vote more than that. Yeah. Well, is that the big deal? No, because you can't bring the vote up without 60 votes. So, okay. All right.
We're going to move on to the next
I'm not sure
question.
why that was such a big deal, but okay, whatever.
We have a question to Congressman on robocalls. Brian from Mankato says, I got 5 robocalls yesterday. When can Congress stop them?
Actually, I have a bill that's moving through. I think the Senate's actually passed that one too. So there is something on the way on robocalls. Originally, it was in the last Congress. I can't remember who introduced it. But Colin Peterson was one of the people, a Democrat, neighboring Democrat to our north, that sponsored that. We co-sponsored it, as did I think a lot of people, because they're like, these robocalls are out of control. So there is a bill moving. There should be some relief, and hopefully it's a lot better than than the do not call list or whatever they put together years ago. That was kind of a convoluted system. We should see some progress in that real quick.
Dr. Jeff Taylor from Mapleton asks, what are you doing to help reduce the high cost of health insurance?
So, Doc, I know you've been dealing with this for quite some time. Here's my position on health insurance, health care. I don't think Minnesota needed Obamacare. I think that was not good for the state of Minnesota. The state of Minnesota had almost 94% of the people with an insurance card had insurance in the state of Minnesota. We were a leader for the country. We had a system in place, a pool for people with high risk, pre-existing needs, and it was working quite well in the state of Minnesota. You know, if anything, ours was a model for the nation. But what happened with Obamacare is it destroyed the high risk pool that we had, and it's driven premiums through the roof, especially for people who get it in the independent insurance market. But on average, it's been almost a 200% increase on premiums. And now there's a lot of people in our state have premiums so high, $20,000 and $30,000, for instance, with deductibles so outrageously high that the insurance is virtually worthless. There are a lot of people with insurance cards, even some that have been given insurance by the government, not expected to pay, can't go to the doctor because they can't afford the deductible. This happens a lot, people putting off insurance. So my contention is that Obamacare has not been good to the state of Minnesota. We had something in place that was much better. And in the previous, one of the debates with my previous opponent, I'm not going to get into it too much, but he agreed. He said, sometimes you have to make a vote for the good of the nation and not your district. I kind of disagreed in that sense because I thought in Minnesota we had a good thing and it should be nationalized. It should keep it at state level as much as possible. Moving forward, we have 2 ways of going. You know, my side, Republicans, conservatives, we want more focus on competition, transparency, and cost. High-risk pools for people with pre-existing conditions paid for by insurance companies. So everyone gets timely, quality medical care. Nobody goes broke. And we want to make sure we continue with the medical innovation and all the cures and everything else that are so much greater in this country than anywhere else around the world. About 90% of all the new cures, all the new therapies, the medical technologies, everything, where is it developed? Here. Not developed in Canada, Not developed in France or Germany, anywhere else, developed here. And the rest of the world piggybacks off of us. So, the other side, the liberals, sorry, the Democrats, the ones you see on TV running for president anyway, if you want to look at them, they want to go the other direction. They're not satisfied with Obamacare either. They don't necessarily want to dismantle it and get rid of it and move it back like I do and have these other things to replace it with. But they want to take us to things like Medicare for all. They want to take us towards single payer. So, and now you have a bunch of presidential candidates saying, oh, no, we can't do Medicare for all because, well, that'll take away insurance from 180 million people. That'll take it from all the people in the private sector to get their insurance. You're going to get government care. You know what the union person says to that? I went out and bargained for my benefits. I have the best medical care in the world. You're not going to take that away and give me some government junk. That's what's going on. And so all of a sudden now even the Democrats moving away from Medicare for all. But still,
Who's got the best medical care in the world? Medicare and medical care is not the same as health insurance. Health care is not the same as the insurance industry. Get it straight.
Did you wake up on the wrong side of the bed today? What's going on?
No.
So, you
I
know,
woke
here's
up
the
happy
thing.
that I wasn't in bed with you.
So here's the thing. So you want to move to
Okay,
Medicare?
sir. Let me know. I will be starting a recall petition to get this man out of here. Get out of here.
Okay.
I'll be coming to your door. You can sign it. Recall. We're going to recall you. You are not Minnesota. Who are you? Don't let the door. Way out.
All right. So anyway, Medicare for all, that type of thing, isn't gonna work. It certainly isn't gonna work for Southern Minnesota, because when you go to more government control, government reimbursement for medical care to our doctors and hospitals, reimbursements to doctors and hospitals go down. They don't go up, they go down. And it won't sustain the system that they have at the Mayo Clinic. It won't sustain our rural hospitals that are already under stress. And if you talk to any of the rural hospitals, the independent ones like in Blue Earth or Medelia, go around and talk to the rural hospital people and ask them, do you think Medicare for all will be good or bad for rural hospitals? And every last one of them will tell you, bad. It's not going to be good. They'll go out of business, they'll go broke. They'll consolidate much worse than they already are. So that's where we are. That's the choice we have in front of us. And I don't believe in the end that the people of Southern Minnesota would want us to go towards single-payer socialized medicine, because it's going to destroy our economy, not just in and around Rochester, Minnesota, but in and around all these rural hospitals.
Okay, our next question comes from Paul Beatty of Mankato. Paul says, is anyone making a solid plan to pay off the $23 trillion national debt? It will take 30 years at $939 billion per year to pay it off.
We'll take your contribution now, Paul. I'll tell you what, it's a great question, and it's sad, because it doesn't seem to matter who's in office, Republicans or Democrats or whatever, the debt has been doubling every basically 8 years. It did it under Bush, it went from 5 to 10 trillion, under Obama it went from 10 to 20, and now we're at 20, and it's moving towards 30, right, basically. So, tough deal. A lot of structural issues with the debt right now. About almost 80% of the money that Congress appropriates is mandatory money. We have discretion over like 20% of it, so it's on autopilot. We've talked about this before. If you want to attack the debt, and right now we have record revenues flowing into the government from all the economic opportunity and investments and everything else, and spending still through the roof. It's just wrong. And so the Senate has a budget reform bill that they passed through the Senate, made it through the Senate, biannual budgeting, things like that. I'm all for those types of changes. That would make sense. We need to go back to regular order on appropriations and pass the 12 appropriations bills separately, rather than have these big bundles of omnibus appropriation bills. They've got one coming up next week. I'm voting no. I said that the one thing I disagreed with the president on moving in, particularly, was on the spending issue. And he said that he didn't want to pass any more of those big spending bills. And I said, I'd hold him to that. I don't want to vote for those things anymore. We should have regular order where you can reform the government. I have some experience in that, but we can't do it. We just have these big bundles of spending. And that's how the government gets shut down, because it's one big bill and you gotta take it or leave it. And so those types of things. If you want to get into what needs to be done on entitlements and reforms across the board in order to have some structural changes to our deficit and our government spending, we can do that. But both sides have to get together and do it at the same time. Because if one side does it, the other side will use it against them politically. I mean, I wasn't even in office. I was running in the last campaign, and they said Hagedorn's going to do this and that to Social Security and Medicare. I wasn't even in office. I didn't say a word about those programs, and yet that's what they're going to do. And so when Paul Ryan wanted to reform Medicare, whether you thought that was a good idea or a bad idea, the minute he had a proposal, he was in a commercial, pushing Brandy over the cliff. Remember that? So that type of stuff has to stop. If we want to get together and reform things and make it better for everyone, and to try to solve some of these fiscal issues, we can do it, but it has to be nonpartisan. And I don't see both sides getting together right now to do that, unfortunately, but we'll see what happens.
Okay, the next question is from Amanda Emmerich of Mankato. With the House passing the USMCA, what changes were made, and more importantly, when will southern Minnesota farmers see the markets reflect the changes, or reflect their favor?
Yeah, we already went through most of that, but it gives me an opportunity. I think we should talk a little bit about China and trade with China. I had a lot of people on the left be critical on Facebook and other places saying, Trump's trade wars and look what he's done to farmers. And frankly, I don't think that's really fair, because it's China that started our farmers, not the president. It's China that retaliated against the farmers, not our president. And it's China's trade war against our farmers. But, in getting out and talking to farmers and agribusinesses, I really don't know of one yet that didn't say we didn't have a problem with China that needed to be dealt with. I mean, almost everybody agrees we had a problem. They've been cheating, they've been dumping their steel, taking over the world steel market, manipulating their currency, forcing transfers of technology. They were not good actors. And they hadn't been good actors since the Bush administration and the Obama administration. And it shouldn't have taken President Trump to have to stand up and do something against China. Somebody should have done it long ago. And the fact of the matter is, if you're going to take on a country like China that's very adversarial and cheats and does all these things and is going to do these retaliatory efforts to try to hurt our people and our economy, if you're going to do that, you better do it when your economy is pretty strong and when they're in a little bit of a tough spot. And so if you're ever going to take on China, this was the time. China has some political unrest over there. When you get 2 or 3 million people in the streets protesting, that's a big deal. They don't want that to go to the mainland. That's a problem. They've lost half their hogs. They're having a hard time feeding their people because of the African swine fever. They have a lot of inflation and unemployment, and now they're losing market share. Literally every day in China, businesses are getting up and moving to Vietnam and other countries. They're leaving, and some businesses that thought about doing work over there said, you know what, I don't need to be in China anymore. We can go somewhere else. And when that starts to happen, it tends to have a little bit of an effect to where you sometimes can't shut it down. I think China's in a little bit of trouble. And now would be the time they'd want to start making deals and getting things, moving the right direction for them as well. But what I never hear people tell me is that, they may not like it, and the farmers certainly didn't want to be in the middle of it, but the market facilitation payments that were made from the tariffs, that has helped the farmers to get through the season and be sustained in many instances. And if you ask the farmers, they will tell you that. Would they rather be producing and trading and selling? Of course. But while we're going through this and trying to make it better for the long run, if you ask them, they said it had to happen. Most of them will say it had to happen, should have happened a long time ago. But what nobody ever tells me is, what should we have done? If Trump didn't do what he did with China, what should we have done in return? And if you don't like what's going on right now, do you want to go back to the way it was? Where should we go from here? Nobody ever has the answers. A lot of people yelling and screaming and saying things in a political way against the president and people like me, but nobody ever seems to have any answers about what they do on the other side. Now let me give you another indication of how China is a cheating country that is out to hurt our people. And you don't have to go very far. Everybody heard of the Cambria group, right? The people that make those quartz countertops, and they're located just up the road. 1,000 employees in this area, 1,000 employees dependent upon that one company right there. And the owner of Canberra came to me and said, China is dumping quartz products into the United States. They're trying to do to us what they did to steel. And if you remember 20 years ago, China had 8% of the world's steel market. Now they have about 48%. Now how did that happen? Are they just hard workers and invent? No. They dumped steel, they ran people out of business, and then before you know it, they're the only game in town, and they get the work. That's totally wrong. Can't happen. So they were doing the same thing to quartz in the United States. So I went down to the International Trade Commission on behalf of this district and the people that work at Canberra in that industry, and I testified before them, and I told them what was going on. And it wasn't just partisan Jim, it was Amy Klobuchar, and it was Senator Smith as well. And we got a 5-0 decision against the Chinese. And before you know it, they're imposing duties and tariffs on them in order to even it up to make sure that their cheating doesn't prevail and we don't lose those jobs. So sometimes tariffs and duties and these types of things make a lot of sense. And sometimes you have to fight an enemy in order to move things forward. And in this case, I think it shows across the board that frankly, another president at another time should have handled these issues so we never had to get to this point to begin with. But we're going to make it better, we're going to have these deals, and I think moving forward it's going to be good for everyone, including our farmers.
The next question is from Willa Daly of Mankato. We have a lack of workers to fill jobs in the rural area. What can you do to help?
Well, like I said, as far as the skilled workers and workers in the rural areas, we're on that. But in other instances, I'm for rural enterprise zones to give tax advantages, regulatory advantages, other advantages to companies and others that do business in the rural areas. We're working on that with Senator Scott and some others. He has a similar bill, but I don't think it's tailored enough towards the rural communities. And in general, you're right. We need more reimbursements in the rural areas, not less. People always think, oh, it's cheaper to live out there, but it's more expensive to either find the labor, attract the labor, and it's more expensive to drive around and things like that. So I agree. Sustaining agriculture helps to sustain our way of life in these rural areas, and doing what we can in order to make sure that we're on par with the larger communities, like rural broadband, having those types of things, infrastructure. Because if we don't have the same types of abilities to do our jobs and to live our lives at a high standard, then we'll lose out to the bigger communities. They just will want to locate somewhere else. So those are the types of things that we're working on, and we'll keep working in bipartisan fashion with everyone else, like Governor Walz and the people at MnDOT, like Commissioner Kelleher, to try to complete the Highway 14 project from Nicollet to Wall. And whatever it takes, if we can find federal money, fine. If we have to do it with state money, we'll do it there. But we'll all work as a team moving forward as we have been for the last 10 months. And answer your question, or is there something else you're looking for?
Well, I'm just to expand on it a little bit. The problem with rural unemployment affects more than just the agricultural market. Yeah. And making our rural communities stronger. For example, I happen to be in real estate. You know what happens when the rural economy is depressed, and you're trying to maintain a good value for land and homes and sell them, and nobody wants to move there, nobody wants to buy them because there's no jobs there, there's no income there, and so that's just one example of the importance of helping that part of the economy, because it affects residually so many of the businesses along the way.
I agree with that. There are some advantages to talk to somebody. Can't remember which of the Google type companies it was, but talking about, I think it was GE, about how the digital economy and opportunities, they're looking more and more at locating in rural areas and doing things that way. And that's a possibility, I guess. But the main thing is to try to keep our main streets as vibrant as possible, keep our ag economy as strong as possible. I do support a guest worker program for people to come to the United States and work and fill needed jobs on a temporary basis. It's something we could perhaps make it so they could gain credits towards citizenship. Those types of programs, though, are undercut by the fact that we haven't secured our border. and that people can just run over the border, come in and work next door and circumvent the program. So I'm not for amnesty, I'll never be for amnesty, but I am for a guest worker program in those areas.
The next question is from Erica from Mankato. How much time do you spend in the congressional district that you live in?
Basically, it's about 3 days when you go out there each week that you stay. So this next week is a little bit different because our votes are starting early in the day. But in a normal week, if we had votes Monday night, I'd fly out Monday morning. And then we'd have Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, votes on Thursday morning, you fly back Thursday afternoon. That's pretty much the way all of us do it in the delegation. Most of us are on the same flights back and forth. So I made 32 trips back and forth. And then we're here, you can watch my Facebook page and others, so you can see where we are. We're pretty much trying to get across the district the best we can, keep connecting with people in a number of different ways. And so, 32 trips is 32 trips. I don't know how to answer other than that.
Linda of Mankato says, rural broadband and good internet service is essential to doing business in greater Minnesota. What are you doing to help meet these needs?
Yeah, we support many measures, especially on the Ag Committee. We have a whole provision to deliver broadband to the rural areas. So there's two programs. One is with Ag and the other one's FCC. And so working with our small cable providers and others to see that that's done. And we have quality. You can't just deliver it and then make it so two people can't be on the same account at the same time. It has to be quality broadband you can use for a number of applications, including agriculture. So on small business and others, we move those through, but mostly it's just an accounting for what the agencies are doing now to deliver it. And this year, the biggest impediment to delivering more rural broadband was the weather. It was so wet. It was tough for the companies to get in there. And they did a little bit of work, and now it's going to be tough with the winter months. Paul?
There are at least 3 companies working on low Earth orbit satellites that constellations deliver broadband internet worldwide. One of them has already launched 60 satellites.
Yeah.
They're planning to start launching next year.
Well, okay. Well, any of these types of technologies as they come forward, if they make sense, certainly we want them to be applied or to be in the mix. But we all get it that unless you deliver a quality broadband where people can live a quality life as compared to the bigger cities, we're going to be in trouble. So it's I think Congressman Stauber, Congresswoman Craig, myself are all at a hearing in Stauber's district on this, and so we all support it. I can tell you that, and a big part of it's in the ag bill that we just got through here a couple of years ago before I was in office.
Brian Williams of Mankato asks, have you read the IPCC report regarding climate change?
No.
Why not?
Tom of Mankato says, what are you doing to end gun violence? Would you consider a ban on assault rifles? Why or why not?
No, I don't support confiscation of weapons. I don't support bans on classes of weapons like that are, I support the right of law-abiding citizens to keep and bear arms for legal purposes, for self-protection, and whatever that might be. And we should enforce the laws on the books. We should keep the weapons away from people who shouldn't have them. And that, when you look at it in Minnesota, we're kind of an example of what works. We have a record number of firearms in the possession of Minnesotans right now. We have a record number of concealed carry permits in Minnesota. And yet gun violence in Minnesota is at a 50-year low. That's a good example of how good people doing the right things make a difference. And so... What's an assault rifle?
AK-15, AR-15. Why should anybody own AR-15?
So what's
It's a
your?
weapon of war.
So let's there's 30 million of those out there, right? What would you suggest we do with the 30 million that are out there? If we quit selling them today, as they did during the Clinton administration for a period of time, let's say you want to quit selling them today. There's 30 million of them out there. What do you want to do?
You don't need to turn the question back. I asked you what,
Well, I'm just saying, I'm agreeing with your premise. If you say we should ban them, we shouldn't have them anymore, right? Shouldn't sell them. I'm agreeing with your premise. Now what do you want to do with 30 million that are there?
so that's a good start.
Start with banning.
And then move from there.
But what you're telling me though is
Voluntary buyback.
banning those weapons isn't going to solve any problems because there's 30 million of them out there.
It's a good start. It's a good start. You can buy that.
Right. So here's what's really going on, and I don't think you're completely being as truthful as you should on this, because what's going on is that the left wants to ban classes of weapons, and then the left wants to go and confiscate those weapons. That's what this is all about. We have almost 400 million firearms in this country. All right? No, well, Beto O'Rourke did, others do. Some of them are honest about it, but that's the way they did it in Australia and other countries. The guy I ran against last time was for that. So I'm just telling you, my position. I'm for the law-abiding citizens to have that right to keep and bear arms.
Okay, our next question is from Diane Schmidt of Mankato. Your opponent calls you a lobbyist. When have you been a lobbyist?
A lobbyist, never been a lobbyist. I can't speak for him. All I can tell you is that I've never lobbied, never been a lobbyist. I was a congressional relations officer, though, for the Department of the Treasury in Washington. And as a congressional relations officer, I was able to take legislation that was my own initiative and idea and take it up to Congress and get it through. It's called the Electronic Funds Transfer Improvement Act, and it's from 1996. And what that did is it forced the government to pay people, Social Security recipients and others electronically instead of a check, unless they had a need and they could still get a check. But for most people, it meant we went from, hundreds of millions of check payments a year to like almost zero. And so we saved $200 million a year, and it downsized my own agency. I think I'm probably the only person ever to run for Congress or be in Congress who downsized a federal agency before he ever got to Congress. Right? And so even maybe after we get to Congress, not too many people downsize agencies. So maybe they're misunderstanding what that is, but when you're a congressional relations officer for a federal agency, you don't lobby. Matter of fact, that's illegal. So perhaps they should figure that out.
Which question did you
Doug?
set aside?
Pardon me?
Which question did you set aside?
I haven't put any aside, sir. I haven't put any aside.
I know what I saw.
Doug Hitzman of Mankato asks, what have you and what more can be done to protect the unborn?
Well, we're on a lot of bills right now that should be passed. And first of all, what happened in the 80s under Reagan with the Hyde Amendment was very important, that we no longer use federal funds for abortion. That was very important. There's some people that want to roll that back. That shouldn't happen. And over time, we've realized that babies can be viable at a sooner and sooner point. And in fact, medical technology and others have taught us that at about 20 weeks, they can feel pain. And so many of us are on a legislation that says that after 20 weeks, when adults have had a long time to figure it out, right, no more abortions. That's too much. And, last time they brought that up, 96% of the other party voted against that. So we're in a little bit of an impasse. Our party is for bills like that, and the other party is against bills like that. More recently, we've had some governors around the country who have stated, especially the governor of Virginia, that the concept of a baby being born after an abortion, that baby didn't deserve medical rights, that baby could be cared for and then allowed to die. We think that if a baby survives an abortion or any time after birth, that the baby deserves timely quality medical care just like everyone else and should be given every chance to live. And so the Born Alive legislation, we support that. We have over 200 people that have signed on to the discharge petition on that. And so there's a number of things that we're doing to try to protect life. Every life has value, We just had a hearing a couple weeks ago in small business with a young fellow who had Down syndrome, and he had his own business. It was pretty neat. And he got into his business of selling T-shirts with all sorts of slogans about how wonderful it is to be a kid with Down syndrome. He takes parts of his money that he makes and he puts it towards little babies that have Down syndrome, gives them little onesies with little slogans. And the whole point of that is there are countries around this world that have no people with Down syndrome. They abort every last one. And it's really sad when you see a guy like that and see people and you realize that everybody has value. Every life has value. And so between that and lots of other things, government's responsibility is to help people who are most vulnerable. And that means in some cases the elderly. That means in some cases, of course, those who are unborn, people with special needs, and the disabled. So it has to be our focus, and it'll always be mine.
We have time for one more question, and that question is from Anita. What can you do to reach across the aisle and help mend our democracy?
Well, I think we are reaching across the aisle. The way you do it is you get the work done with your colleagues. And I think in spite of all this impeachment and all the bickering that's going back and forth, and people like Mr. Van Drew and Congressman Evans of Pennsylvania, we didn't even talk about another bill that I've introduced that made it through the Small Business Committee, passed a couple weeks ago, would help small businesses who are subcontractors become prime contractors down the road, which is really important for small business. But we get together and we work on shared issues. There's an issue right now where the tribe at Treasure Island, the Prairie Island Native Americans would like to move into a location in this district. So Congresswoman Craig and I are working on that bill together. I just think you just go do the work, and you don't worry about the politics. All the theater and the theatrics and all this impeachment stuff is it's gonna go away pretty quick. We're always in campaign mode, it seems like these days, with the way the media cycle is and everything. But from that standpoint, I think that's how best you do it. The couple of things I wanted to talk about real briefly. Here in Blue Earth County, we're working with your regional airport. And we secured some money, but we're going to keep working with them to make sure that the taxiways are redone because you have a really good problem here. That the Minnesota State Mankato aviation program is expanding so quickly. It's really all the way to where it can go because there's something like 300 folks in the program, and it's putting a heck of a strain over there in the airport with the airspace and a lot of the traffic in and out of the airport. So we want to help with the taxiways, we get some money to repave the runway, and then the goal over time is to make sure that we either have a remote tower that's using cameras and so forth to help with a controller to get the planes flying in a more systematic way, or we build an actual structure, a tower that would allow for the controlling to happen to make it more safe. So either way with the towers, it's kind of a long project, probably several years, but we are working with your folks very closely on that. We're very proud of all the educational institutions in the county, here in Blue Earth County, in particular your higher education with Minnesota State Mankato. I spoke with President Davenport just a week or two ago. Carol and I were there, had a great conversation. He seems to be doing a terrific job as everyone else is, and we're really proud of that institution. Certainly proud of your sports teams, right? And you're wearing this stuff right here. You're doing pretty good. I think hopefully be a couple of championships brewing there. And then also Bethany College, and then South Central is across the river with the vocational training and everything that they do. Lots of nice opportunities here in Blue Earth County. I also like to say, and I thank our law enforcement officer for being here today, and we have just enormous respect for law enforcement. This past week across the country, we saw some incidents, very tragic and unfortunate. There was two law enforcement men that I know of that were brutally killed, and one was essentially I don't want to talk about the one in Arkansas, it's just terrible, but they have dangerous work, it's changed over the years, and talking with law enforcement across the district, you know, they all tell you the same thing. It isn't just walking the beat anymore. You gotta be social worker in some instances, and you gotta know about these illicit drugs that are coming. Some of them, they just touch them, they can die. And it's really quite difficult work. And unfortunately, over the years, there was a time when the respect seemed to be on the wane for law enforcement. But I believe that that's turned around. And I just want to tell all of law enforcement that we appreciate what you do, and we have your back 100%. And with that, Merry Christmas.